Hello and welcome to the Jim RPG Show. If you weren't sure what to make of the title, CD Projekt Red have been rather deceptive with their marketing during the release of Cyberpunk 2077. But the title is also a pun on the fact that CP77 needs an overwhelming amount of GPU shading horsepower that many gamers, particularly ones who typically game at 1080p, simply don't have. In this video, I want to talk about GPUs required to run this game, how NVIDIA 10 series and 16 series GPUs and the AMD equivalents don't make the grade, and how this all eventuated in the PS4 and Xbox One versions of the game turning out the way they did. Now, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and also to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Let's start this video by saying, I'm rather surprised to see so many gamers actually buy CDPR's non-apology letter. In the letter it states, we would like to start by apologizing to you for not showing the game on base last-gen consoles before it premiered. Was this an accidental mistake? It looks to me it was planned all along to block the PS4 and Xbox One base versions of the footage before the game released. As companies know all too well, once the product and money changes hands, most gamers don't bother to refund or return it and just move on. CDPR forced reviewers to play the PC version, and as prolific reviewer SkillUp writes, I certainly hope we learn from this and never again go along with any review process this restrictive and manipulative. A few weeks ago, CDPR released their PC system requirements, but withheld performance targets, and when asked by gamers whether it was for 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, CDPR stayed quiet on Twitter and on their forums. This led to me releasing a video speculating that the requirements were most likely going to be 30 to 40 frames per second, using a bit of GPU analysis and intuition, and that proved to be correct. To get anywhere near 1080p 60 frames per second on medium settings, you need at least an RTX 2060, which effectively means that any Pascal GPU from GTX 1070 down is going to run below a lot of gamers' expectations.
To all my Pascal gamer friends, it is safe to upgrade now.
Before we get into more in-depth examples, I do want to quickly talk about the motives for why NVIDIA and CDPR would want to make the game so graphically intensive. CP77 is an NVIDIA-sponsored title, which means it works with NVIDIA to implement NVIDIA technologies such as ray tracing and DLSS into its games. Now, having demanding system requirements is nothing new for PC gamers. For NVIDIA, it is definitely in their interest to exceed older hardware, as this leads to hardware sales. There's nothing really wrong about this, as this would simply be a case of making the game look as good as they can in order to drive as many sales as they can. But the part that is the problem for me is that CDPR has raised the bar extremely high and offered very little for users on older hardware. For CDPR and developers in general, ideally it would make sense to target as wide a market as possible, which would include PCs and consoles. CDPR obviously decided that the trade-off for making the best possible looking game would mean it had to be for high-end hardware only, and it was worth sacrificing the PS4 and Xbox versions at the end of its life. And it's clear from PS4 and Xbox One footage that the game doesn't scale well to lower-end hardware. On a PS4 or Xbox One, the game is left with bare minimum performance with a dynamic resolution down to 720p at 30 frames per second or lower. For CDPR, funneling users to the PC version of good old games would also mean 100% of the money would go straight to the owners. In my previous CP77 video, I speculated that the memory bandwidth on GPUs would play a role in performance loss, based on some preliminary benchmarks from Tom's Hardware. This hypothesis really needs to be tested further to determine when this actually becomes an issue. That said, there is something more than memory bandwidth and shading performance holding 10 series GPUs back. As you can see here in these charts, the RTX 2060 and GTX 1080 are relatively similar performing cards with similar memory bandwidths, but the GTX 1080 performs noticeably worse. The same thing occurs with the GTX 1660 Ti and GTX 1070, the GTX 1660 Ti being on Turing architecture. Tom's Hardware writes that Cyberpunk 2077 likes newer GPUs and poses the question, is this a lack of optimization for NVIDIA's Pascal architecture, Or is it a case of CP77 using DirectX 12 in ways that benefit the newer architectures more? Moving on, take a look at this video which shows the low settings versus ultra settings on PC. There is only a very minor difference in visual quality moving from the low settings to the ultra settings. This does equate to a 25 to 30% performance difference according to Digital Foundry, when dropping all the way down to low, which, to give credit to CDPR, is beneficial to lower end users, but on the whole it seems the bar is very high for low settings, judging by the environmental detail alone, almost excessively so, which begs the question whether CDPR could have lowered some graphic settings further. The point I want to make is that there's almost no perceptible difference in some scenes. Why would the developer do this unless it was to keep system requirements high? The PS4 base level is significantly lower quality in contrast, and it's not possible to select that level of quality in the PC game. At some point in time, CDPR decided to make this the most graphically intensive game on the market, but this came at the cost of the base PS4 and Xbox One versions. For CDPR, that moment was somewhere after this demo in 2018, as the game fundamentally looks different to the one shown there. The game packs in way more environmental detail, which requires more polygons and textures. The game back in 2018 would have stressed the base level PS4 and Xbox One anyway. Gamers commenting online have already said that this game actually ended up looking better than the pre-release footage. Normally I would be all for a game that looks better on release, but in this case the PS4 and Xbox One gamers were sacrificed, but CDPR still shipped out a barely acceptable game. The question I have is, would PS4 and Xbox One owners have settled for a game that looked like the 2018 version that may have possibly ran better than the 2020 version? Finally, take a look at the PS4 version and you can see that the PS4 version has a setting that's significantly lower than the lower setting in the PC version. The PC version shown in this clip is showing the ultra settings, but we have established that the low settings are quite close to ultra anyway, and definitely a step up from the PS4 version. Why didn't CDPR include these graphical options in the PC version of the game? There are many games with much lower detail settings. This might just be CDPR ensuring that when videos get shared online, the game looks great no matter your hardware, despite the performance issues that people have no choice but to accept. So the question is, did Nvidia work with CDPR to make everybody on Pascal upgrade? We obviously can't say for sure, but as a business tactic, this would make a lot of sense for Nvidia. It's the same reason why they include technologies like ray tracing and DLSS and have them only work on their cards to make you buy their GPUs. As you can see, DLSS gives a huge performance boost, and you can only get these on Turing and the new Ampere cards, which means they could push the GPU demands further, knowing they had DLSS to save the day on these newer GPUs. Pascal owners would be out of luck. Perhaps they were going to upgrade anyway, but this game most likely created an urgency to upgrade as soon as possible. With most people being comfortable on their GTX 1080s and 1080 Ti's, it wouldn't be surprising if Nvidia did want to force the issue on upgrading hardware and collaborate with a game like Cyberpunk, as it's one of the most hotly anticipated titles in a long time. In the end, the examples I've raised regarding the PC's impressive looking low settings, the PS4 and Xbox One's subpar performance, and Nvidia's and CDPR's interest to favor high-end PCs, makes many of the decisions about this game questionable. Most people might just see this as a developer making the PC version the best version of the game, as they should. But I think it goes just a little bit further than usual because they left out lower end PC users and abandoned the PS4 and Xbox One gamers. Of course, they could both be morally upstanding companies, and this video is just made by a bitter gamer that can't play the game well with his 2015 hardware. I guess we'll never know, but the least I wanted to do was point out that CP77 is a game that just about everyone who wants to play this on PC or console wants to, or rather needs to, upgrade. 2020 is almost over, so maybe gamers will forget about the terrible PS4 and Xbox One release in favor of the next-gen version in 2021, of which I do believe will be a more acceptable console version of the game. However, let's not forget a famous creator once said, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." Okay, that's it for this one. Make sure to click the like button and also to subscribe to this channel for more gaming videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.